Well, that's a good segue from what we were just talking about. Like, I was gonna just start talking about it because emotional intimacy is like witnessing the internal experience of another individual and allowing it to be expressed as their truth. So we have this misconception, or just I don't know. I remember being like this, like, oh, what I believe in my head, other people also see that too. And it's like so wrong. Because each individual, just as you said, you grew up with a relationship with dogs that was like traumatizing. So the way that you view dogs now is very different than I view dogs because of our past circumstances. So, like, when you are interested in understanding the emotional intimacy of another individual, it's recognizing that the way you see the world is different than the way I see the world. But how can I work to understand what you're going through based on what you perceive your experience to be?
Cause everything feels bigger. It's all fire and little stones become boulders when they're held for long enough. Skipping stones across that river.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. You are listening to Don't Be Afraid to Talk podcast with James. I believe if we are going to affect change, we must go back to the basic, which for me, in essence, is conversations. Talking and listening is key for growth, and I hope our stories will bring us together and we can draw inspiration from each other. Conversation will include topics such as mental and physical health, trauma and its effect, suicidal thoughts, recovery, and well-being. We will continue to raise awareness and offer a different perspective, a mindset, or an idea that could inspire you to take charge of your well-being and to grow as a human being. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ask the Therapist. Today I'm joined by Kat, who is intimacy therapist as well as intuitive healer and nervous system specialist. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about emotional intimacy. So I'm really excited about this. And Kat, how are you?
I'm so great. Thank you. How are you doing?
Good, good. Nice to have you here. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, so I'm a therapist and I specialize in intimacy and nervous system regulation, which are a not so common pair, but I am super nerd about the nervous system. So I'm excited to share some of the things that I am working on and the things I do with clients with you.
Amazing. Great, great. Before we get going, we're going to play a quick game called One for One. And I'll give you a word and you say the first word that comes to your mind.
Okay.
The first one is trampoline,
Jumping,
snow,
flake,
costumes,
Halloween,
nurse,
doctor,
tiger.
lion.
That's it? Great. Did you used to be a nurse?
No,
No? Did you
mm-mm.
work in hospital? No?
I did for 5 years.
Okay.
Yes, and I've been in the hospital since I was like 16. I used to volunteer there, and then I did an internship there in undergrad, and then I had to do a bunch of clinical rotations in grad school, and then I worked for 5 years as as a clinician for 5 years, and I
Hmm.
was like, man, this is not really how healing should happen. I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. So once you see that side of it, you're like, okay, I have to question certain things.
And it was honestly, it was like a vibe. You walk
Hmm.
into the hospital and you're like, it doesn't feel like this is a place for healing. It feels like this is a place where a lot of people have anxiety and are depressed and sad because of their experience and rushed
Hmm.
and isolated because lots of times they can't leave their room. So it's like, this doesn't feel like they also don't go outside for long periods of time. It's
Hmm.
crazy.
And did you find yourself just kind of getting drawn down. Like if
Oh
you're going
yeah.
in like real happy, and then 2 hours in, you're like, oh, I'm tired now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the basic things that you need for health, like movement, being outside, water, good food, those like, basic things. Oh, also connection with others,
Mm, mm,
are not prioritized in the hospital for various reasons. Like in the acute side, so I don't know how healthcare kind of works there, but we have like an acute hospital. So that's where people go for immediate illness. Sure, it's the
mm.
same. Um, and so depending on their situation, they get isolated because they don't want things to spread,
Yeah.
or lots of times there's critical patients. But then they kind of move into this inpatient rehab side where lots of them are promoted to move more, or
Mm.
like do more exercises, but they're still heavily isolated into your room. You spend the majority of the day in the
On your
room.
own. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you'll do like therapy in the gym or group therapy, but they don't involve, hey, let's talk about your experience.
Yeah. You're just kind
Like,
of doing X, Y, and Z. There's no.
yeah, and like your podcast, don't be afraid to talk. These people are terrified of what happened to them. They just had a stroke or a spinal cord injury or a heart surgery, or they had COVID and they're recovering. Like they have chronic fatigue. Lots
Mm,
of people had fallen and broken their hips. So a lot of fear, a lot of new circumstances in life that literally turn people's life upside down, and they're terrified.
mm,
And one of the most surprising conversations I had with a patient was, I was like, okay, let's sit down. How are you doing mentally and emotionally? Just
mm,
start crying. They're like, in 14 days that I've been here, no one has asked me that.
mm, mm. Some people just need that, don't they?
Everybody
Just,
does.
yeah. Yeah. Like a connection.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in an environment where you're just a patient, for example, someone have to go out of their way to ask you, like, how are you today?
Mm-hmm.
To actually get to see, like, who's the person behind whatever condition it is.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, too, hospital staff are extremely overworked.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
not as many staff members
No.
as they need. Therapists are, have a full caseload. They're seeing 8 people a day. Nurses
Mm,
are seeing 12 to 16, I'm sure. CNAs more, like it's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. So,
Compassion
like,
fatigue is a real thing.
having time to speak to someone just might not be on top of the list.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. When you saw, yeah, even here, like, the nurses are definitely overworked. It's like a global thing.
Yep,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, brilliant. Now let's start talking about intimacy. So, my first question is, what is emotional intimacy?
Well, that's a good segue from what we were just talking about. Like,
I know, yeah, we kind of got from.
I was going to just start talking about it because emotional intimacy is like witnessing the internal experience of another individual and allowing it to be expressed as their truth. So
Mm,
we have this misconception, or just, I don't know. I remember being like this, like, oh, what I believe in my head, other people also see that too. It's like so wrong.
mm,
Because each individual, just as you said, you grew up with a relationship with dogs that was like traumatizing. So the way that you view dogs now is very different than I view dogs because of our past circumstances. So, like, when you are interested in understanding the emotional intimacy of another individual, it's recognizing that the way you see the world is different than the way I see the world. But how can I work to understand what you're going through based on what you perceive your experience to be?
mm, mm. And do you think with that, we just assume that your partner would know what you'd know?
I mean, that whole phrase about like when you assume you make an ass of you and me, oh, 100%.
Mm,
You're if you don't it's so tricky because if you don't understand your own emotional experience, because not many people spend time trying to understand their emotions, but rather they mask them with addictions or distractions or something to put in front of having to sit with pain. Because emotional pain is processed the same as physical pain in your brain. We avoid pain. We avoid emotional pain. We avoid physical pain because it's processed in the same area of your brain, and your brain sees them as the same thing. So it actually physically hurts you to recall an experience that's emotional. And then this is like a hard truth for me to teach, but also like accept, is that emotions are relentless. They happen all the time. You could think about the experience you had with the dog when you were little, and your brain doesn't know if it's happening now or if it happened then. So so many people are having these internal battles about past experiences that you, as the observer, have no idea that they're going through. So you have all these people who are battling these demons in themselves, and no one else knows anything about it.
So in terms of emotions, they essentially don't have a time if you don't process them.
They do what?
They don't have time, as in if you don't deal with it, like when you're 5, if you're 40, your brain still thinks it's happening now.
Well, that's just how our brains work. Like any event, if you could recall any emotional event that you've had, because our brain doesn't really remember like, oh, what did you have for breakfast? Unless while you were eating breakfast, something crazy happened that evoked an emotion that now you remember. So it's these emotions are like time stamped, and they're like, hey, this was significant. Remember this, because in the future, this comes all back to the nervous system, which we will cover. But in the future, if you're dealing with a dog, you have already had past experiences that have been negative. So what your nervous system then does is it says dogs are danger. And then when you grow up and you have an experience with a dog, your nervous system says, hey, we had an experience with this dog this one time. Remember it, because it's a threat to your safety. So without the knowledge of the nervous system, these events just kind of like compound on each other and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and meaner and more emotional, because we don't have the education to understand what's happening in our nervous systems, how actually traumatic experiences should be processed. Not should be, but like a process that happens. And that confusion creates more internal conflict.
And do you think for couples to build intimacy, the difficulty is they don't know themselves enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Because relationships are, I'm like, oh my gosh, a huge encourager, because it's the biggest growth process that you can have. Like a relationship, building a business, and having spiritual journeys are 3 ways that you can progress not only your like physical body, but your mental, emotional, spiritual, transcendent parts of you that you can't really access by yourself. You can access in the container of a relationship, and with the right skills and understanding, you can really help to evolve each person within that dynamic. It's a beautiful dance of evolution, but both people have to know what that even means.
Yeah, I was listening to a therapist before who said it takes a couple about 10 years to build any sort of intimacy. Like it could take about 10 years, and because once you get married, you think, because you both bring in certain beliefs, and for 2 years to actually meet in a place where everything is good, it could take about 10 years.
I think I don't like to add numbers, because it validates maybe what your belief already was before they said that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, that's going to be too long.
It's
I
gonna be
don't
a
want
long
to enter
time.
a
Yeah.
relationship where 10 years later we'll be like, oh, ding, 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 we made it. I think the more that you understand yourself and the more that show up as an authentic version of you, and you know, like, I'm going to take responsibility for how I'm showing up, and this person is too. It's a mutual commitment to growth and building intimacy that I don't believe needs to take that long.
Mm, mm. Okay, I'll move on to my next question because I can ask another one on top of that. And my next one is, how is dysregulated nervous system play into this?
Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background and the listeners a background, your nervous system is your internal alarm system, and it's made up of nerves, which are about 40 miles combined within your body. So you have 40 miles of these electrical highways that take information from the external environment through your senses. So like taste, touch, smell, feel, hear. Those are all pulling in information. It's traveling through your nerves up your spinal cord to your brain for processing. And so we have this great example now of your dog.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not traumatizing you with the dog situation, but your nervous system takes in information from that experience, and it's like danger, 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 and it stores that in your nervous system. And the dysregulated nervous system is when you have lots of periods. Let's say maybe you had a bunch of dogs, but instead of being dogs, they are people in the environment, a boss, a coworker, a stranger, and they're all like providing this feedback to you that's negative. And so your nervous system is like both trying to fight the threat while also not doing it in a way that's not societally appropriate. You can't fight people. We generally can't run away from them either in the workplace. So what we're actually doing is we're kind of like traumatizing ourselves in these boxes that we've created in society, because you're not able to express your emotions in a way that your animal self probably would. Instead, you have to be polite. Yes. You have to be appropriate. You have to be these things that are going against your biological nature. So your nervous system is trying to say, we feel danger. This person is bad. This person is negative. This person doesn't make me feel good, but I have to sit here and eat it and suppress it. And then we put ourselves into these states of overwhelm because your nervous system is like, I want to go, but this is telling me no. And then you never really make it back down to baseline or homeostasis or that parasympathetic state, which is your rest and digest state. So we have a lot of very hypersensitive, hyper-vigilant humans running around who over time, when that activation happens and enough dysregulation happens, then you have an emotional outburst or an emotionally explosive event like we see in these very tragic things that happen globally. And maybe it's because this person never learned how to regulate themselves, and they're just like having this internal battle that turns into a ticking time bomb.
And when that's happening, we just say, for existence, if it's happening in work, where you're constantly like coming and going. Now, when you go home to your partner, obviously that's still happening. Is that still happening? So is it a case where we don't know what to do with it, so we bring it home, and then it becomes a problem at home over time?
I mean, we're always projecting. Projecting is like whatever we're experiencing internally, we start to mirror it onto other people. We start to see it reflected in their behavior. So we're always doing this thing where it's your fault.
Yes.
It's not me, it's them. They're the worst. And unfortunately, in the home environment, because this person becomes the target of your rage, anger, sadness, you see them so often that your nervous system starts to associate them with a sympathetic nervous system state, so that fight or flight state. And then you just hate their face. Right? You're like projecting all the shit that happened.
I can't even look at you right now.
Yeah. And you're projecting that state onto your partner, and it's happening underneath your conscious awareness. And this is where, like, I'm so passionate about the work that I do because I believe everything starts at home. So if people were more peaceful at home and they started off their day at peace, then it doesn't really matter what happens in the external world because they can anchor into states of peace because that's what their main environment is. So peace at home is where it all starts.
And if you're not familiar with it, obviously, if you're bringing your, say, work troubles home constantly, it's hard to kind of have any way of building any intimacy in a relationship when one partner or both of you are constantly stuck on this state of fight or flight. Yeah.
Well, and when you're in the state of fight or flight, based on your biology, you do not prioritize connection.
Yeah.
It's higher up on the list of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like true connection is much higher than safety and security, obviously, because if we were just like, yeah, let's go home and be intimate, but I don't feel safe, you're at risk of death or not surviving. So the animal part of you will always prioritize keeping yourself safe instead of connecting with the person that would probably help you to be able to regulate yourself if they had the tools or understanding.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Okay, can I move on to my next question?
Yes.
What are some of the reasons I may fear intimacy?
This happens for a lot of reasons, but in the first 7 years of life, you access what's called theta brainwave state more so during that time than at any other time in your life. In theta brainwave state, basically you're just downloading what's happening in your immediate environment. So not just from your parents, but at 7, you start going to school or you're around family and friends, you start watching TV. So all of these early influences create this mold of how you see love and stress. And coping with stress are my two that I really talk about with clients. Like, you were modeled how to love from the way that you saw your parents love each other and love themselves and love you. So whatever you took from those instances is put into a mold or a program that you download into your little computer mind. And it starts to influence how you show up in relationships. So if you had a tumultuous experience when your parents didn't handle stress well and they took it out on each other, you might download that as, oh, fighting equals love. Or maybe you were really nervous to express yourself to your parents, knowing that if you said something they didn't like, you would get punished. So you don't express yourself. And so that looks like anxiety when expressing yourself in a romantic relationship, because there's this thing that you decide at that age that if I am open and honest, I will not be chosen. I will not be loved and accepted. So that's all happening at the level of your nervous system. And when you start to feel those body sensations of, I remember this feeling, it's like, ugh, it makes me want to constrict because I remember this from my childhood and I'm feeling this with my partner. Your body will start to give your mind information on how to act. And it might look like you shut down.
Yeah.
And then if you don't know what's happening and you shut down and your partner's like, doesn't even want anything to do with me. He never wants to talk to me. And meanwhile, you're like, because I'm terrified.
Yeah.
So
wait till I tell you.
It's just this weird game, right?
And do you think part of that is like, obviously, with your partner, you want to tell them things, but you're afraid of their reaction.
Yep.
So you just kind of keep swallowing it.
Yep. And so that starts with how you were received when you were younger, but also, gosh, there's so many complex factors here, but I love it because I love puzzles. When you attract someone, typically you attract a dynamic that you can acknowledge or you witness as something you've experienced in the past. So they might be reflecting the qualities that you recognize as something comfortable based on how your parents acted towards you. So lots of times people attract the dynamic of their parents, which makes a lot of people uncomfortable because it's like, I'm dating my mom or I'm dating my dad.
Yeah.
And you're not really dating your mom or your dad, but you're attracted to the quality that you associate with being comfortable. So when you're doing that, and then maybe you have your first fight and you're like, oh, great. They're responding in the same way that I felt physically when I was younger. And now I'm going to remember this because I already have this past memory of feeling this way and it feels worse right now. So in the future, when we have this experience, I'm going to be more reserved because I don't want that outcome. So this is where people start to experience significant disconnection because there's this piece of not understanding the nervous system, not understanding how we as humans are actually not intelligent animals. Like we should be remembering and practicing a lot of the same things that animals and kids still do, right? Like when they feel a certain way, they're going to tell you.
Yeah, they express it.
When they need to regulate themselves, they're going to roll around on the floor, bark, scream. Adult humans are like, oh, I can't do that. It's bad.
Yeah.
So
kind
bad.
of afraid to scream, like in case you upset people.
Yes. Afraid to scream. Like we don't really have solid, healthy physical outlets for adult tantrums.
No, you become obsessed with what people think.
Yep. But I mean, there are definitely ways that you can move energy through exercising, walking, like breath work, dancing, talking to someone about how you're feeling. And when you're doing that, you're expressing energy, which leaves your body and allows you to see more clearly what's actually happening versus what you are being triggered by.
Yeah. Just another question on what you're talking about. When it comes to attraction then, when two people meet, for example, at a bar, and you see someone, you get very excited because they are unconsciously triggering a part of you that's familiar. So do you think we are confusing danger with excitement when that happens?
Danger with excitement. I think those are two of the same sort of sides of they're like danger, excitement, and novelty are all under the umbrella of the unknown.
So when I attract someone that's familiar to me, who's say bad parenting, I'm attracting another bad person. But because I am attracted to them, I'm perceiving them as being a nice person. Does that make sense?
Well, so let's go back because I don't ever want to say anything's bad.
Okay, yeah.
Because having something that's bad validates that you're bad in some way, right? Nothing's bad. Everything is information. So, I mean, when you're at a bar and you see somebody across the bar and they're just hot, it's just like, that's a natural, that's not you attracting your mom or your dad. It's you being attracted to someone. And then maybe you start talking to them and there will be nuances or things that they say that are like, oh, that reminds me subconsciously of something. Or the more you get to know them, you start to realize that you're attracting this person because it's reflecting something that you personally need to see to heal from. So this person that's quote unquote bad is not bad because they're showing you in a person maybe something that you haven't seen yet in yourself. And so this is like a huge lesson because then you can be so grateful for every person that you meet. Every person that steps into your bubble is here to show you something about yourself to grow from. It's going to be better than any of those books that you have not read yet.
Yeah. Just find people that trigger me.
Well, no, any person that makes you happy, any person you talk to on the street, at work, like if they're physically coming into your energy bubble, they are here to show you something about yourself.
great way to look at people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yep. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for being in my awareness. Like, when would we have met, right? Like, this is, you're
Yeah.
in my awareness. We get to have this conversation, and I'm learning from you just as much as you're learning from me.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely a wonderful approach. When you're seeing people, instead of just like, oh no, they're bad. Yeah, totally. And yes, my next question is, why is love not enough when it comes to intimacy? Because I think we think that, oh, I love you, so we should be fine. But
Well, again, what, like, your version of love, based on what you've experienced in your life, is extremely different than what mine is.
mm,
So why is love not enough? Well, because what does love look like to you personally? And if you've never spent time answering that question, I highly encourage you and everyone listening to, like, if I was to describe what my version of love would look like, how would I describe that to an alien? If an alien came to Earth and was like, what the heck is this thing that you say love is? How do you know if you found it? And like, that baffles people so much because they're like, oh, I don't know. I have this expectation for what love should be. I romanticize it often in my mind, but a really cool analogy I give to people is like, well, if I was to say, I am going to plan a vacation for James, and I don't know anything about him, I'm going to plan a vacation. I'm going to be like, he wants to go to, I'm just going to give you a wild example, the North Pole, because he loves penguins. He's going to have a little igloo, and it's going to have the cutest fire, and he's going to have food. And you're like, I don't want to go to I don't want to go there. That's not my ideal vacation at all, right? So your expectation of a destination that you want me to be able to fit is like that situation. Like, if you don't give me any context of what love looks like to you, or what it feels like, or how I would show up in a partnership that is mutually, like, you both love each other, how in the heck am I going to meet that need or that desire?
This way a lot of talks comes in.
Yeah, a lot of talk, a lot of dialogue. This is where the work is at. And this is where personal responsibility is the biggest key here, because you're personally responsible for the way that you feel, and that's it.
I like that. If I don't know what it looks like to me, but I expect you to know because we're together.
And that puts a lot of, it's not fair to put that on your partner. It's also very confusing for you. And you will, unless you say definitively, I'm looking for this specific thing, and you just say, love, I have this goal tonight. I'm gonna find my love at a bar. Great. You're gonna get a lot of information, and the information looks like the wrong person. A conversation that leads you to saying, this is not my person, this particular one, but I can be so grateful that they showed me what I don't want, because it allows me to point my direction in what I do want. So this goes back to where everyone is showing you something that you can then take a little piece of them and say, I loved this about this person. I loved it. I'm going to put it in my love bucket, because this is what love feels like, looks like for me.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of self-understanding of what you actually want instead of thinking you're going to give it to me.
Yep.
And do you find that, I think it's one of my questions, do you think a lot of people struggle with that one because you have the mindset that this person should know and should be able to not fix, but should be able to make me feel a certain way?
Yes.
But it don't.
And then my question back to you is like, well, when did we decide that? When did we decide that others
We never
knew,
did decide that.
or yeah, right. So when you're little and you're 7, and then you start to realize that you have more autonomy. So you want to do things yourself. This is when kids are like, oh, they're so difficult because they're just like, so they're learning their independence. It's just like a really cool milestone. But the rest of their life, they get beaten into like this mold of, you actually don't know. Somebody else knows better than you. Your parents, school. School is like a little factory where they put you in this box and like, hey, you have to follow this curriculum and this schedule and this behavior.
Perfectly, yeah.
So you're relying on your teacher to tell you when to go to the bathroom, when to speak, when to express yourself, how to express yourself. And so you're giving the power to them to say, they know better than me. They'll meet my needs. My parents know better than me. They'll meet my needs. You go to a job. My boss will be able to tell me what job description is the best for me. You look for politics or religion to continue to seek this external validation that you really just missed in connecting to yourself. So now you're placing all of your needs and your wants and your desires and your aspirations into this person that you're just supposed to be in a relationship to love, but now you're relying on them to make you happy.
Yes, we do that quite a lot as individuals and couples. It's like, you're meant to make me happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, we forget that like happiness has to come. Like, you need to find your own happiness and bring that to the table. Don't wait for me to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. My next question is, and when relationship is lacking excitement, how do we find that moment back?
I mean, you said danger, excitement, and novelty, right? Like those are all under the umbrella of uncertainty, which is super sexy. And it's also scary, right? Like a good question in the moment where you get into a rut of, I'm not excited anymore by my relationship. A good self-reflective question would be, how excited are you in your own life? How connected to your passion are you? Are you living are you on a mission? Are you feeling yourself? And if you can honestly answer those and be like, no, actually, I haven't been showing up for myself lately. Maybe I haven't been taking care of myself and I just feel yucky. That's going to be reflected into the relationship as stagnancy and monotony and not excited. So if you can introduce a new skill for yourself, a new part of your routine, a change of your wardrobe style, like these little things that you can do to feel better about yourself will help to then you're morphing into a different person that your partner then has to like try to meet. And oftentimes those changes create a little bit of conflict because with alchemy, like internal alchemy, it's a chemical change. You're physically changing, which causes a chemical reaction within you, which makes you feel different to your partner, and then they have to adjust. But the adjustment is growth.
What happens when you're adjusting and the other one is like not adjusting?
That happens a lot. So again, understanding, communication, and having a mutual value in the relationship of growth. So lots of times there's people who enter relationships because they actually they're like comfortable. Yeah. You see this all the time. People are comfortable in relationships. They made it to marriage. Great. We said I do. And now we get to just exist. And that's terrifying for me, honestly. I'm not married.
We're just existing now. Yeah.
The idea that I've been shown for so long, which I'm working in my own personal life to recreate, is that marriage was defined by the church. And it was created with this idea that it has to be this specific mold in order for it to be accepted by society. And it's like, oh, marriage is, you made it. And actually, in the spiritual side of things, marriage is where it just starts, because now you have a container. In my personal life, like preparing for that union is me taking myself personally to the highest potential that I could take myself to develop an understanding of myself, so I'm ready to then expand into somebody else's world, because I've taken myself to I hit a ceiling and I can't bring myself any further into expansion or evolution without having the dynamic and the challenges and the conflict of another person.
Totally, yeah. And you see that as well when you talk about excitement, like at the start, because everything is new, everyone's excited. And then after a period of time, you go back to, we say, no more. There's nothing else is new. So the excitement starts to die down because you're not bringing anything.
And if you say no more, right? Like if you're like, there's no more excitement here, then you're probably not asking enough questions.
Asking yourself the questions? Oh, okay.
You're not putting yourself in situations where you're never gonna know the answers to the universe. So if you're not excited, you're just not asking big enough questions. Because if you ask a big question, you will start to find the answer. I promise you, you will start to be led towards the answer, and it's going to break you open.
That's the fear, isn't it? That's the change in the fear.
So change is challenging because it's new and it's unknown, and most people don't like the unknown. But my like spirit animal that I have above my desk and everything I do is this butterfly concept, because we should constantly be evolving. That's how you stay thriving. That's not how you're just existing. You're thriving. You go through this metamorphosis of death and rebirth every time you ask a new question and you find the answer, because a part of you has to, quote unquote, die, this ego death, where the part of your ego has to die, but it doesn't go easily. It's hard.
Oh, yeah.
It'll kick and scream. It'll be like, no, stay here. It's safe. Stay right here.
Yeah, let's look at it next week.
Yeah, and that's the little part of you, like the little kid inside that still exists and is trying to just keep you safe in knowing and telling you, predicting the outcome. And if you can't predict the outcome, then there's a chance you might not make it, right? Like that's what your little kid is telling yourself. You're like, if you make this decision, I can't help you because I don't know what the outcome's going to be. And that puts us in a scary place. So don't do that.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Because in relationship, that's often spoken about where things were great and then you just kind of hit a stalemate, but no one's actually doing anything about it because we're not asking ourselves the right questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Brilliant. My next question is, how do men and women view intimacy? What's the differences?
So, I mean, honestly, like I can only speak from my personal experience. I don't like to put people in boxes of expectations. Like I will never be a person that's like, men need to do this, women need to do this. Because I think that at the very core, intimacy is just being understood. Is being seen and heard. It's this felt experience. It's this desire for connection that everyone has. So like at the very basics, we all want to feel safe. We all want to feel worthy, and we all want to feel connected and loved. And under that, it's like if you can meet those needs in yourself and with your partner and really operate knowing those core wounds, then you develop understanding, and understanding is a felt experience, and it creates a desire for more connection, which is intimacy.
And do you think that women are closer to, say, intimacy than men?
I think women are more comfortable with their emotional experience, or they spend more time in their emotions, whether or not they're good or, dysregulated. With their ability to process through emotions is a different story, because if you have a woman who's very emotionally chaotic, it doesn't really invite a man to bring his emotions into the dynamic, because if he brings his emotions into an emotionally chaotic experience, who is keeping the dynamic safe? Nobody. So the job of a woman is to work with understanding and developing emotional intelligence, to not shy away from experiencing them, but rather be able to self-regulate so that you can create a space and a container for, yes, I can have these emotions. Yes, my man will be there to support that. But I can also be a regulated space for him to then come into this dynamic and feel safe to take off armor and open up.
Mm.
And then once the woman is taking responsibility, you know, my emotional side, I need to be able to self-regulate. That's her responsibility. And the responsibility of the man is to know that, great, if she's emotionally chaotic or having an emotional experience, I don't have to fix it. All I have to do is make her feel safe.
Mm.
I just have to be here to support it and not make her suppress the way she feels or make her feel crazy. I just sit there and I provide support. And the more that people understand this dynamic, the more actually, like, you know, you're saying, oh, the men need to keep her safe. And I'm also saying women need to keep men safe. And I'm also saying men need to express their emotions. And I'm also saying women need to express their emotions. So there's no difference. It's just being comfortable and being able to self-regulate this emotional experience.
What happens in the case where, so she wants the man to be more emotional and he becomes more emotional, and now she's not able to contain both because now his emotions are kind of not taking over hers, but they're becoming more important, but she's not able to hold both of them. Is that a case where if you want someone to be emotional, you have to be comfortable with your own?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all a projection, remember. So whatever she's experiencing when he does become more emotional, it's not that he's becoming more emotional and she doesn't like it. It's, oh my gosh, he's becoming more emotional, but I feel really terrified still of my emotional experience. So she's projecting her fear of emotions or emotional expression onto her partner who's now expressing their emotions. It's scary.
Women, well, generally women, from what I heard is women like men who shows their emotion.
Again, that's very subjective. It's very reliant on the person. I think people are craving for more connection and they don't have the words to describe. So sitting with these things are so important. Like, they don't have the words to understand what they're actually craving. So they're saying, I just want you to be more emotional. Well, if you tell somebody to be more emotional and all of a sudden they're so emotional, but you didn't add more context, like, I want to be able to have more vulnerable conversations with you so that you can let me know how you're feeling when it's happening instead of when it has gone too far. That's maybe what they mean. But if you don't give someone context and they give you what they think that you are asking for, and it's not what you're actually intending to ask, it's like, no, I didn't want that. I don't like that.
It's too much.
It's too much. Yes,
yeah.
But taking personal responsibility of what you're seeing, what's being reflected, and how to move forward is part of being in a conscious relationship.
Yeah. Great. My next question is, what do you find is a most struggle? What do we struggle with the most?
Man, that's a big question.
It is.
What's our biggest struggle here on Earth?
Yeah.
I think dysregulation, for sure. I think there's too many people who are dysregulated humans running around, which when you have dysregulation causes this like dissonance between people's energy. So it's like being in the middle of an ocean and there's a storm happening and all these waves are crashing into each other and it's so chaotic. That is what the world is feeling right now. Because if you're dysregulated and you go out into the world and you're angry and you don't know what's happening in your body, and then Joe at work, he also doesn't know what's happening in his body. He absorbs your frequency and now he becomes angry and he's like, I don't even know why I'm angry. And then he goes home and then he's angry and his wife's angry and now his kids are angry. So you not being regulated, not saying this is you, but just giving you an example.
Oh yeah. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. You like people not being regulated or understanding the function of their nervous system and their effect on others is just causing this chaotic storm amongst the world. And there's all this research that is not, I mean, people aren't going to know about this because it's not something that you can really capitalize on or create a pill for.
No, make a night about it. Yeah.
They've done lots of research on meditation and how when you can teach one person to self-regulate, it causes this ripple and it can positively influence so many people around them. And when multiple people are meditating together, it creates this butterfly effect and the ripple can be felt around the world. So the same principle applies for regulation versus dysregulation. And so the more I can teach people about how to regulate themselves, the more it's just building on this wave of regulation that hopefully will spread.
Yeah. Yeah. Spread in your house. Yeah. Start at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And my next question is, okay, we've covered this one here. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on this. How important is it when it comes to feeling safe with your partner? And like you have to be able to feel safe before you can communicate your guilt, for example. We use guilt.
Yeah. It's extremely important because it's the most basic need on the hierarchy of needs, feeling safe. But again, always, you have to feel safe in yourself. And what does that look like? It's learning how to trust yourself. And what does that look like? It's how much do you, when you say you're going to do something for yourself, how often do you show up and do it? How much do you trust yourself to make a decision with confidence before second guessing yourself or overthinking? So those are self-reflective questions that let you know how safe you feel in your own body.
So if I don't feel safe and I come to you, obviously I'm relying on how you feel. But if I feel safe, I'm not so much depending on you. Your response won't really...
If you don't feel safe and you come to talk to your partner about something, you will be more emotionally triggered and you will project your lack of trust in yourself onto that person. And you say, I don't trust you. But if you feel connected to your body and the sensations that you have in the presence of someone who's being honest, you will feel a lot of physical confirmation because you trust yourself. Oh, I trust these sensations. It feels like this person is also telling me the truth because I'm centered in my own experience. I'm not chaotic seeking for safety. I'm like, I don't trust myself. I'm seeking safety in you and you're not giving me the right answer. So now I don't trust you.
Yeah. Then it's like, you're doing this to me.
Yep.
Yeah. Brilliant. Now the fun questions is fun ways to build intimacy.
Well, I have
tons of videos.
I have tons of videos. I'm always dancing because I do that honestly. Let you in on a little secret. No, very few people want to listen to me talk or listen to people talk on Instagram. They're there to be entertained, right? Like if I can entertain them while I'm also sprinkling in a little bit of information that then leads to a bigger conversation, awesome. That's me rippling out a fun vibe towards things that are scary to talk about or things that are vulnerable. Yeah. So lots of intimacy prompts on there, lots of exercises. I'm also hosting a free workshop on the 6th of February, which will then be posted on YouTube. So even after you are listening to this after the February 6th, you can get on those, the videos, but we're going to be learning from a massage therapist who's going to teach some massage techniques to use with your partner. We're going to be working with a wardrobe consultant on how to dress for date night. And more specifically, like if you're nervous about date night, there are colors that you can choose that help you to feel calm in yourself that will support you subconsciously in the date night. And then
never thought about that.
It's a mind-blowing. Yes, she's amazing. She's super great at helping you to like curate your wardrobe for it to support your confidence in the world at a very authentic level. Like she's not going to force you to dress in a specific way that you don't want to dress. It's all curated based on the tones of your skin and your eyes and tranquil colors. So it's like optimizing your confidence through wardrobe. And then on the third day, I'm going to be talking about like intimacy positions, toys, gift ideas, and date night ideas that you can use when building intimacy. So like a couple of days of love next week, but those videos will all be on my YouTube. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, they are quite informative and entertaining. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's like,
By design.
It's like, what is she doing? Okay, some tips on how to bring up this conversation with your partner.
So, first and foremost, understanding that it starts with you. So just bringing awareness to your emotional state and knowing that it's not a bad thing, reframing your relationship to intimacy or to your emotions, hiring somebody. I know this is not always accessible to people, which this is why I create a lot of free content, but really truly like making the jump to hire someone that can help to explore this. I've hired lots of coaches, mentors, and I will continue to, even as I progress. Like you hiring somebody to reflect back to you things that you can't see is super important in a safe way too. They're not going to yell at you or call you bad or whatever. They're going to be very supportive of this process and help you through your experience. Join a community of people who are having conversations like this. Attend a retreat. Like finding where your edge is at. You'll know where your edge is at. You're like, ooh, that feels scary. But getting close to the edge and being like, I'm just going to look at the edge. What does the edge feel like? What is it giving? What is the information it's giving me? And just getting comfortable being by your edge instead of seeing it as something that's going to hurt you. Get close to it. Make friends with it, because eventually you'll see it's not that scary, and then you can start to push it a little bit. And then you adjust. And then you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then push it a little bit. And that's how you expand in a way that feels comfortable for your nervous system. Because if you try to say, tomorrow I'm going to tell every single person how I feel about them in the moment that I feel it, it will blow your mind and your circuitry and you'll feel very dysregulated. So if you can move at a pace that's slow and feels comforting for yourself, that is highly recommended by me.
There's another thing you mentioned there about that's fine. So you covered it. So I have two more questions for you.
Yes.
I think we touched on this already. Some tips on how to build emotional intimacy in a relationship.
Yes. So I also have like a couple of guides available. I have a steamy text guide, which it has 100 prompts in there. So 100. There's like 100. 100 prompts. And it starts with like very sweet. So things you can text your partner that are sweet and thoughtful. And then it gets to flirty. And then it gets to spicy. And then there's this whole section of like actually deeper conversation prompts that you can bring up. Like, hey, when you're overwhelmed, when you're feeling chaotic, what is one thing that I can do to support you in that state? So framing it in that way is like super soothing and inviting of conversations. So it's just the way that you phrase things can make or break the conversation. I have a date night guide. It has a bunch of different date nights based on your love language. So whatever dominant love language you have, there's dates specifically designed for those. I also have a 6-week course that teaches like so much of what we've talked about today in a way that's self-paced. You can do it by yourself. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
self-paced. It has lots of exercises to do. And so whether or not you're in a relationship, but you're seeking a relationship, like you want one in the future, you have the capacity to learn a curriculum that's going to prepare you so that 10 years down the line, you're not being like, I have intimacy. It's before you
Yeah.
even start the relationship, you feel comfortable building intimacy. So you're learning skills and tools and knowledge to be able to build that from hello.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Don't wait until it's like, oh my God, what's this intimacy stuff about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Starting with hello, feeling like I know, hey, I learned about body language and the importance of tone of voice and how much that affects my ability to connect with someone. So you're like ahead of the curve with the knowledge you learn.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. So, um, yes. Yes. And my last question is, this one is in relation to desire and shame.
Mm.
So I have a lot of desire, but also have a lot of shame around it. I'm just using me as an example. I have a lot of desire and I also have a lot of shame around it. So how can I work with that?
Well, asking yourself when did I learn about shame? And shame is something that is not only present in your lifetime, it's a it's a belief, a societally and globally formed belief around sex and intimacy and desire that was carried through your genetics.
Mm.
We, like 2000 years ago, the church decided that sex was only okay to explore within the container of a marriage. And there's truth to that. But if you're teaching people growing up, there's some truths, right? Like there's some pieces that I can be like, okay, but the principle that they went about teaching people around sex is deeply ingrained in their nervous system. If you teach little kids it's not okay to explore sex and intimacy until you've reached a connection with somebody that is forever and eternal, you're
Mm.
still influencing their nervous system even after they say I do and they feel like it's okay to explore sex. You've just deeply ingrained a belief into people that sex, intimacy, connection is shameful,
Mm.
desire is shameful. And it
Yeah.
was not your intention, right? Like it wasn't their intention to F up everybody's relationship to self-exploration and self-intimacy, but that happened because they probably
Yeah.
didn't understand the nervous system.
Mm. Mm. So you might have a desire and you're in a relationship, but you have a lot of shame that came from somewhere else. So
Yeah.
you struggle with that and you start thinking maybe there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Mm.
and it's like even bringing up maybe a potential for a kink or like a sexual preference or a fantasy that you have. If those conversations were not had growing up, if you
Oh
weren't
yeah.
safe to explore these things with your parents, or you have so much you described, like you said kind of your relationship with feeling shame around even talking about female sexuality in your family
Oh
is not
yeah, yeah.
okay. Yeah, so you still carry this little boy in you who, if you asked yourself, like, how old is this little boy who's talking about the shame I feel about talking about a woman's body? He's probably like 6 to 8 years old.
Oh yeah.
He's like this little boy he's driving your behavior because he remembers when I asked a question about boobs when I was 8 and my grandma spanked me or somebody's,
Yeah.
then you remember that and you're like, I can't even bring up this image in my mind because I'm terrified someone's going to tell me I'm bad and that I'm not going to be loved.
Mm. Mm. Totally, yeah. Shame, yeah. Shame and intimacy.
Shame and intimacy. So when you do feel that ping of shame, it's a good time to reflect inward and ask yourself, hey, what am I feeling right now? What am I telling myself about this situation? And that's like the introduction of developing intimacy with yourself is instead of asking outwardly, is this okay? You turn inwardly, hey, is this okay? Is this okay for us? Do we feel like this is something I'm excited to explore, but I'm a little nervous? So you're having a dialogue with that 8-year-old self.
Totally, yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. This was a fun conversation. I love what you're doing.
I have thanks. Yeah, I love your videos.
Thank
They're
you.
always very funny. It's like, what is this girl doing at home? So my 2 questions, which is not relation to intimacy. If you're attending therapy, what would your ideal therapist be like?
If I was attending therapy?
Yeah. Like, who would be not, you can't say that.
It would be someone who makes things fun and is like, doesn't make me feel shameful or doesn't hesitate when I ask or say the word boob, right? Like, if I'm going to say something and there's a hesitation, I'm going to immediately feel something.
Yeah.
That's an extreme example, but like there's a vibe, right? Like if I'm going to bring up something that's vulnerable or hard for me to talk about, I want the person to add humor or joy or it to feel very flowing and ease. That's just me. That's just kind of my vibe.
Yeah, make it fun. Yeah. And my last question is, my last question is, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I love to travel and I have a white fluffy golden retriever and I love taking him downtown and going to try new food places. I love to dance.
Costumes.
Yep. I like to have fun. I like to feel expansive. That's what I like to do for fun.
Brilliant. That's great.
2.
Okay.
Two big dogs.
And
do you have dogs?
No, I don't have dogs. Now I can put up with dogs. I have something childhood trauma with dogs. So it used to be very bad, but now like I can put up with them being there. Before it was like, no, I'm not going into the house with that dog there.
Aww.
Yeah, but now it's like, oh yeah, they can just sit beside me, they're fine.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And then I was visiting my friend over Christmas and they had a dog and like she just wanted to play. And I was just playing with them, but I just like, oh, I don't do the whole licking thing. I'm still like
getting used to it. Yeah.
But yeah, it's taken me a long time before it was really bad. But yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna have my drink of water. Sorry.
It's all good.
Okay. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Start again. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a quick review on my Facebook page, Don't Be Afraid to Talk, or DM me on Instagram. The show notes will include all of the relevant links from today's episode. If you haven't already, please download, leave a rating, and share with your friends. You might just reach that person who needs to hear this message. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I am James Lumumba, signing off with gratitude.